As a lifelong sci-fi fan, conventions were my happy place. The excitement of cosplay, the hum of excited chatter, and the chance to meet creators I admired were the highlights of my year. This time it was the Galacticon in Seattle, a 3-day event celebrating everything from classic space operas to modern-day alien thrillers. The first day went by in a blur of panels and merchandise booths. I was particularly looking forward to a panel about reptilian aliens in popular culture. These creatures, often depicted as sinister and cunning, had always fascinated me. The panel promised an in-depth look at their origins and evolution in media. I arrived early to secure a good seat, my eyes scanning the crowd. The room filled quickly and the air buzzed with anticipation. The panelists were experts, including a renowned xenobiologist and a special effects artist who had worked on some of the biggest sci-fi blockbusters. They began by discussing the historical roots of reptilian myths, from ancient civilizations to modern conspiracy theories. Halfway through the panel, my attention drifted. I glanced around, taking in the colorful costumes and enthusiastic faces. That's when I saw him. He was sitting in the back, partially obscured by a group of stormtroopers. At first, I thought he was just another cosplayer. His skin was an eerie shade of green, his eyes slit-pupilled like a snake's. But something about him felt off. His movements were too fluid, too precise. And his gaze, it was intense, almost predatory. I shook my head, chiding myself for letting my imagination run wild. It was a sci-fi convention after all. People went all out with their costumes. But as the panel ended and the crowd dispersed, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had seen something extraordinary. The next day, I tried to put the encounter out of my mind. There were more panels to attend, more exhibits to explore. But as I wandered the convention floor, I kept an eye out for the mysterious figure. It was like trying to spot a needle in a haystack, but eventually I saw him again. This time he was at a booth showcasing alien-themed artwork. He moved with a quiet grace, his eyes scanning the artwork with what seemed like genuine interest. I hesitated, then mustered the courage to approach him. "Great costume," I said, forcing a casual tone. "Did you make it yourself?" He turned to me, and for a moment, I felt like a rabbit caught in a snake's gaze. His eyes, up close, were even more unnerving. They had a depth, a coldness that didn't seem human. "Thank you," he replied, his voice smooth and unaccented. "It's a labor of love," I nodded, feeling a bit foolish. "I'm a huge fan of reptilian aliens. Your costume is one of the best I've seen." He smiled, a slow, deliberate curve of his lips. "I'm glad you think so. It's always nice to meet a fellow enthusiast." We chatted for a few more minutes, mostly about the convention and our favorite alien characters. But the whole time, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something off about him. His mannerisms were too precise, too controlled. That night, as I lay in my hotel room, my mind raced. Who was he? Could he really be what he appeared to be? I felt a strange mix of excitement and fear. I decided I needed to know more. On the final day of the convention, I kept a close watch on him. He attended several panels, always sitting in the back, always observing. I followed him discreetly, trying to learn more about him without drawing attention to myself. In the afternoon, he slipped away from the main hall and headed towards a quiet corner of the convention center. I followed, my heart pounding. He entered a small, unmarked door, and I waited a moment before slipping in after him. The room was dimly lit, filled with stacks of boxes and old equipment. He was standing in the center, his back to me. I took a step closer, and the floor creaked beneath my weight. He turned, his eyes locking onto mine. "You shouldn't be here," he said, his voice low and dangerous. Panic surged through me, but his grip was like iron. I shook my head frantically, my eyes wide with fear. He studied me for a moment, then released me. I stumbled back, gasping for breath. "Go," he said, his voice softening. I didn't need to be told twice. I fled the room, my heart racing. I spent the rest of the day in a daze trying to process what had happened. By the time the convention ended, I was exhausted, both physically and mentally. Back home, I tried to return to my normal routine, but I couldn't shake the memory of those cold, reptilian eyes. I knew what I had seen, but who would believe me? And even if they did, what could they do about it? In the end, I decided to keep the secret. I continued to attend conventions, but I was always on the lookout for him. Part of me hoped I would never see him again, but another part of me, the part that had always been fascinated by the unknown, secretly hoped I would. I never expected my vlogging journey to take such a bizarre turn. It all started when I decided to document my solo road trip through the American Southwest. As a newbie vlogger, I thought this adventure would be the perfect opportunity to grow my channel. Little did I know it would lead me to an encounter I'd never forget. My channel was still in its infancy, and I had just reached 500 subscribers. The engagement was modest, but I cherished every comment and like. The idea of exploring the vast, mystical landscapes of the Southwest had always intrigued me. So I packed my bags, charged my cameras, and hit the road. The trip was incredible at first. I filmed breathtaking sunsets over Monument Valley, the surreal beauty of Antelope Canyon, and the eerie silence of the petrified forest. My subscribers loved the content, and I was thrilled with the progress. But the real story began when I decided to venture into the Navajo Nation, inspired by tales of ancient legends and the rich culture of the Navajo people. One evening after a long day of filming, I found myself near a small town called Kayenta. I had heard whispers about skinwalkers, shape-shifting witches from Navajo folklore. The stories fascinated me, so I decided to film a vlog episode discussing these myths. I parked my car by the side of a remote dirt road, set up my camera, and started talking about the legends. As I spoke, the sun dipped below the horizon, and an unsettling silence enveloped the area. The wind picked up, rustling the sagebrush and sending a chill down my spine. I finished my recording, packed up my gear, and decided to drive a bit further before setting up camp for the night. The road ahead was narrow and winding, with no sign of civilization for miles. My headlights cut through the darkness, casting eerie shadows on the landscape. After about 20 minutes, I saw a figure in the distance. It was a lone coyote standing in the middle of the road. I slowed down, expecting it to move, but it just stood there, staring at me with glowing eyes. Something about the coyote felt off. Its gaze was unnervingly intelligent, almost human. I honked my horn, hoping to scare it away, but it didn't budge. Instead, it began to approach my car slowly. My heart pounded in my chest as I fumbled for my camera, hoping to capture this bizarre encounter. Suddenly, the coyote darted into the bushes, disappearing from sight. I let out a sigh of relief and continued driving, but the unease lingered. I kept glancing in my rearview mirror, half expecting the creature to reappear. After a few more miles, I found a secluded spot to park and set up camp. The night was pitch black, with only the faint light of the moon illuminating the landscape. I built a small fire and sat down to review the footage I had captured earlier. As I scrolled through the clips, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. A distant howl echoed through the night, sending shivers down my spine. I tried to reassure myself that it was just a coyote, but the feeling of unease grew stronger. I decided to record a quick update for my vlog, hoping to distract myself from the fear creeping in. As I was about to turn off the camera, I heard a rustling noise behind me. I spun around, shining my flashlight into the darkness, but saw nothing. The fire crackled, casting flickering shadows that played tricks on my eyes. I took a deep breath and tried to calm my racing heart. Then I heard it. A low growl, unlike anything I had ever heard before. It was close, too close. I grabbed my camera and pointed it toward the sound, but the darkness swallowed everything beyond the fire's glow. "Hello? Is someone there?" I called out, my voice trembling. Silence. I stood there, frozen, straining to hear any movement. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the shadows. It was the same coyote from earlier, but something was different. Its eyes glowed with an unnatural intensity, and its body seemed to shimmer, distorting like a mirage. Panic surged through me as the coyote began to transform. its limbs elongated and its fur receded, revealing a humanoid shape. I couldn't believe my eyes, a skinwalker just like the legends described. The creature stood on two legs, its face a grotesque blend of human and animal features. I stumbled backward, dropping my camera. The skinwalker let out a chilling laugh, a sound that seemed to echo from another realm. My instincts screamed at me to run, but my legs felt like lead. The creature advanced, its eyes locking onto mine, then it hissed. I was just making a video, I stammered, barely able to form words. The skinwalker's expression twisted into a sinister grin. With that, the creature turned and disappeared into the night, leaving me paralyzed with fear. I scrambled to grab my camera and dashed to my car, not daring to look back. My hands shook as I fumbled with the keys, finally managing to start the engine. I drove through the night, not stopping until I reached the safety of a well-lit gas station. I sat in my car trying to process what had just happened. My camera was still recording, capturing my terrified face and the frantic drive to safety. When I finally calmed down, I reviewed the footage. To my horror, the encounter with the skinwalker was clearly visible. The transformation, the chilling words, it was all there. Part of me wanted to delete it, to pretend it never happened, but another part knew that this was the most compelling content I had ever captured. I uploaded the video the next day, sharing my experience with my subscribers. The response was overwhelming. Some believed me, others thought it was a hoax, but everyone was captivated. That encounter changed me. I continued vlogging, but I never returned to the Navajo Nation. I always loved going on adventures in the woods near our house. One sunny afternoon, I decided to explore a new trail I had never taken before. The trees stood tall, their leaves rustling in the gentle breeze. I felt a thrill of excitement as I walked deeper into the forest, my eyes wide with curiosity. The trail twisted and turned, leading me to a small clearing. I paused to catch my breath and listen to the sounds of nature. Birds chirped merrily, and I could hear the distant babbling of a brook. I took a sip of water from my bottle and continued my journey, eager to see where the path would lead me next. As I walked, I noticed the forest becoming denser. The air was cooler here, and beams of sunlight filtered through the thick canopy overhead. The scent of pine needles and earth filled my nose, and I smiled, enjoying the peacefulness of the moment. Suddenly, I heard a rustling sound behind me. I turned around quickly, but saw nothing. I shrugged it off, thinking it was just a squirrel or a bird, and kept walking. The trail grew narrower, and the trees seemed to close in around me. I had to duck under low branches and step over fallen logs. The ground was soft and covered in moss, making my footsteps almost silent. I felt like a true explorer, venturing into unknown territory. After a while, I came across a large rock covered in green moss. It looked like a good place to rest, so I climbed up and sat down, enjoying the view. As I sat there, I noticed something strange in the distance. There was a large, dark shape moving slowly among the trees. I squinted, trying to get a better look. At first, I thought it might be a bear, but it moved differently. It was walking upright, like a person. My heart began to race with excitement and a little bit of fear. Could it be? Was I really seeing a Sasquatch? I had heard stories about Sasquatch, also known as Bigfoot, from my grandfather. He told me they were shy, elusive creatures that lived deep in the forests. Most people didn't believe they existed, but my grandfather was convinced they were real. I watched the figure carefully, not daring to move. It was tall, much taller than any person I had ever seen, and covered in dark, shaggy fur. It moved gracefully through the trees, almost as if it was floating. I remembered what my grandfather had told me. If you ever see a Sasquatch, stay still and quiet. So I did just that. I watched in awe as the creature came closer. It didn't seem to notice me, or maybe it didn't see me as a threat. I could see its face now, with kind eyes that seemed to sparkle with intelligence. It stopped by a tree and looked around, sniffing the air. I held my breath, afraid to make a sound. The Sasquatch looked directly at me, and for a moment our eyes met. I felt a strange connection, as if it was telling me not to be afraid. Then just as quickly as it had appeared, it turned and disappeared into the forest. I sat there for a while, my heart still pounding, trying to process what I had just seen. It felt like a dream, but I knew it was real. After a while, I climbed down from the rock and decided to head back home. I couldn't wait to tell my grandfather about my encounter. As I walked back through the forest, I felt a sense of wonder and excitement. I had always loved the woods, but now they seemed even more magical. I couldn't stop thinking about the Sasquatch and the look in its eyes. When I finally got home, I ran to my grandfather's house and told him everything. He listened intently, nodding with a knowing smile. He believed me, and that made me feel even more certain that what I had seen was real. From that day on, I spent as much time as I could in the forest, hoping to catch another glimpse of the mysterious creature. I never saw the Sasquatch again, but I always felt its presence. I knew it was out there watching over the forest. My encounter with the Sasquatch taught me to appreciate the beauty and mystery of nature. It showed me that there are still wonders in the world waiting to be discovered if we just take the time to look. Every time I went on a hike or explored a new trail, I thought about the Sasquatch. I told my friends about it, and some believed me, while others laughed and said it was just my imagination. But I didn't mind. I knew what I had seen, and that was enough for me. My adventures in the woods became even more special, filled with the hope and excitement of discovering something new. As I grew older, I continued to explore the forest, always with the same sense of wonder and curiosity. The woods became my sanctuary, a place where I could connect with nature and feel the magic of the world around me. And every now and then, when the wind rustled the leaves just right, I felt a warm presence watching over me, and I smiled, knowing that the Sasquatch was still out there, a guardian of the forest. The airport hummed with the restless energy of travelers rushing to and fro. I stood amidst the bustling crowd, clutching my worn leather bag, waiting impatiently for my flight. The departure board flickered with updates, a constant reminder of the minutes slipping away. As I paced, trying to calm my nerves, I noticed a figure out of the corner of my eye. Tall and imposing, he seemed out of place amidst the mundane chaos of the terminal. His presence was unsettling, commanding attention without effort. I couldn't tear my gaze away, curiosity mingled with a primal fear I couldn't quite place. He was strikingly handsome, with sharp features and eyes that seemed to pierce through to my soul. His attire was impeccable, a tailored suit that spoke of wealth and power. I turned away, pretending to check the flight status on my phone, but my senses remained acutely aware of his proximity. There was something dark beneath his charm, something that set off warning bells in the deepest recesses of my mind. Minutes stretched into an eternity as I tried to convince myself it was mere paranoia. But each time I stole a glance, he was there, watching, waiting. His gaze never wavered, as if he could sense the unease growing within me. Finally, unable to bear the tension any longer, I decided to move away. I slipped into a nearby restroom, hoping the solitude would ease my nerves. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting eerie shadows against the tiled walls. I splashed cold water on my face, willing myself to calm down. But as I looked up into the mirror, I froze. There, reflected behind me, stood the man from the terminal. His presence filled the room, suffocating and intoxicating all at once. I spun around, heart racing, but the restroom was empty. Fear gnawed at my insides as I realized I was alone with my thoughts and the chilling realization that he wasn't just a man. He was something else entirely. I stumbled back into the terminal, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The familiar faces of travelers blurred together as I searched desperately for an escape. But wherever I turned, he was there, a specter haunting my every move. I tried to rationalize. Maybe he was a passenger on my flight, or perhaps a stranger who bore a striking resemblance. But deep down I knew the truth. He was no ordinary man. He was a demon, a creature of darkness that had crossed into the realm of the living. My mind raced with questions I couldn't answer. Why me? What did he want? And most importantly, how could I escape his relentless pursuit? The minutes stretched into hours as I wandered aimlessly through the airport, a prisoner of my own fear. The demon remained a constant presence, lurking in the periphery of my vision, his silent stare a constant reminder of his unearthly power. I sought refuge in crowded areas, hoping the anonymity of the crowd would shield me from his malevolent gaze. But each time I glanced over my shoulder, he was there, a shadow among the throng, his eyes fixed on me with unwavering intensity. Exhausted and desperate, I sought solace in the chapel tucked away in a quiet corner of the terminal. The air was heavy with incense, a soothing balm against the oppressive atmosphere outside. I sank to my knees, clutching the wooden pew as if it were my last lifeline. "Please," I whispered into the silence, "please leave me alone." But my prayers went unanswered. The demon appeared before me, his presence filling the sacred space with a palpable malevolence. His eyes burned with an otherworldly fire as he towered over me, a predator cornering its prey. I closed my eyes, steeling myself for whatever horror awaited. But instead of pain, I felt a cold hand on my shoulder. I dared to open my eyes, expecting the worst, but instead found myself staring into the depths of his gaze. I trembled beneath his touch, the weight of his words settling like a stone in the pit of my stomach. There was no fighting him, no bargaining for mercy. I was his, bound by a fate I couldn't comprehend. And then, as suddenly as he had appeared, he was gone. The chapel was empty once more, the only evidence of his presence the lingering chill in the air and the echoes of his words in my mind. I staggered to my feet, the world spinning around me. My flight was called over the intercom, a final summons to leave this nightmare behind. With trembling hands, I gathered my belongings and made my way to the gate, praying that he wouldn't follow. As I boarded the plane and settled into my seat, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had narrowly escaped something far worse than I could ever imagine. The demon had spared me, for reasons I may never understand. But as the plane taxied down the runway and lifted into the sky, I knew one thing for certain. Some encounters leave scars that never heal, reminders of the thin veil between our world and the darkness that lies beyond. And though I may never see him again, I will carry the memory of that encounter with me for the rest of my days, a testament to the fragility of our existence and the unseen forces that shape our destinies. The day was unusually quiet as I wandered through the overgrown fields towards the old farmhouse. I had always been drawn to abandoned places, their eerie charm whispering stories of days long past. This farmhouse, hidden at the edge of town, had been abandoned for decades, its weathered wood and broken windows a testament to neglect. As I approached, I felt a mix of excitement and apprehension. Pushing open the creaky door, I stepped cautiously into the darkness within. Dust danced in the beams of sunlight filtering through the cracks in the roof. The air was thick with the scent of decay and nostalgia. I explored room by room, imagining the lives once lived here, until I reached the attic. Cobwebs draped like shrouds over forgotten relics of a bygone era. My eyes fell upon an old rusted telescope perched near the window. I peered through its cloudy lens, expecting only to see the desolate landscape beyond. Instead, my breath caught in my throat as I glimpsed something surreal, a strange, shimmering figure moving silently among the ruins outside. It was unlike anything I had ever seen, slender limbs, a translucent glow, and eyes that seemed to pierce through the fabric of reality itself. Fear and wonder warred within me as I watched the figure glide closer, its movements fluid and alien. Was this a trick of the light, a hallucination born from solitude, or had I stumbled upon something beyond comprehension, something not of this world? I dared not make a sound, fearing to disturb the delicate balance between myself and this unearthly presence. Minutes stretched into eternity as the figure lingered, observing the remnants of human habitation with a quiet intensity. Then the figure dissolved into the air, leaving me standing alone in the attic, heart racing and mind spinning with questions. Had I truly witnessed an extraterrestrial being, or was it merely a figment of my imagination? Leaving the farmhouse, I carried with me the weight of an encounter that defied explanation. And as I looked back one last time at the old farmhouse, I knew that some secrets were meant to remain buried in the silence of abandoned memories.